1900 to 1910 were the simpler days. I was born in the late 1800s, and as I grew into a young woman, the world around me was still firmly rooted in traditions of the past. I remember well the days spent over the stove, tending to the fire and preparing meals from scratch. My kitchen was small, and the wood-burning stove, though reliable, took time to heat. We had an old icebox where we kept milk and fresh meat, but it wasn't nearly as effective as I would later hope for. You had to plan ahead carefully and buy fresh each day. My dresses were long and heavy. Even at home, I wore an elaborate gown or skirt with a corset underneath that tightly hugged my waist. I spent hours baking bread, making jelly, and cleaning, all while trying to look dignified. When I wasn't cooking, I was cleaning. The floors had to be scrubbed by hand, and I would use an old-fashioned broom and dustpan to sweep. No electric vacuum cleaner in those days. I kept the home spotless, as was expected, and I knew nothing else. But technology was beginning to make small inroads into our lives. I remember when my friend came over with her new mechanical egg beater. I was astonished that something could make the task of whipping eggs so much easier. By the time the 1910s arrived, things started to change. Though it felt slow and hesitant, the world was changing, and for better or worse, so was my life. The big change in my home came with the introduction of the gas stove. No more chopping wood for the fire. Now, I could turn a knob, and the flame was there. The icebox, too, was starting to show signs of age. In its place, some families had begun to experiment with early versions of the electric refrigerator. Not many could afford them, but my neighbor got one, and it was incredible. No more worrying about ice melting and food going bad so quickly. It felt like a glimpse of a new world, one where homemaking would be less burdensome. One of the biggest changes I noticed was in my wardrobe. As a homemaker, I had to look presentable, but at the same time, I could feel the shift in what was considered acceptable. I wore lighter fabrics, cotton dresses with simpler cuts that allowed me to move freely as I worked. The introduction of the telephone was another game changer. It was a small thing, but I could now make a call to my sister or order something from the store without having to leave the house. Then came the 1920s, and oh, what a difference a decade made. It felt like the world had turned upside down. For the first time in my life, I felt I had more time for myself and less time chained to the endless tasks that had defined my homemaking years. The electric refrigerator. I finally got one in 1923, and it was truly a miracle. No more worrying about ice, no more changing blocks of ice every few days. Food stayed fresh, and I had more freedom to buy in bulk or plan meals without the constant fear of things spoiling. That was a luxury I never thought I would experience. The electric stove had also become a common fixture in most homes. It was cleaner, faster, and more reliable than the gas stoves I had grown up with. Now, I could cook a meal without having to scrub the stovetop after every use. No more soot. The house was cleaner, and the kitchen was now my favorite place in the house. But technology wasn't just confined to the kitchen. The introduction of the electric washing machine was revolutionary. No more wringing out clothes by hand or scrubbing them on a washboard. I could simply load the machine, and it would do the heavy lifting for me. I remember the first time I used it. I was so giddy, I almost couldn't believe it was real. Fashion, too, had undergone a dramatic shift. Gone were the long skirts and tightly fitted corsets. The new flapper style was in full bloom, and though I wasn't quite ready to adopt the loose, knee-length dresses, I did notice that at-home fashion had become simpler, more comfortable, and practical. I started wearing lighter, less restricting house dresses that were easy to move in. I could cook, clean, and care for my children without feeling weighed down. Perhaps the most significant change for me in this new era was the freedom it seemed to bring. With all of these new technologies making life easier, I could spend my time doing other things, whether it was reading a book or simply sitting down with a cup of tea and letting my mind wander. No longer was homemaking a full-time job that consumed every hour of my day. Thanks to the advancements of the 1920s, I felt like I could finally enjoy the fruits of my labor. Now, as I look back on my years of homemaking, I realize how much the world has changed.